Today, we're going to dive deep into design in South Africa.
The lifestyle of design is different. We have to think very far into the future for something to be living in that way. We need to represent ourselves better because we do great work. It's definitely one of those amazing tools where you can kind of shortcut design time.
This idea of AI is flattening out the playing field in so many ways.
Almost like killing the integrity of where it comes from. It's like step and repeat everything. I think we really want to start to influence the global design narrative through African design. There'll always be developments in tech and digital tools, but nothing trumps creativity.
This is Talking in Creative Circles, the official podcast of the Creative Circle, the voice of South Africa's advertising industry, in partnership with Kagiso Media Radio.
Welcome to the latest episode of Talking in Creative Circles. This is the official podcast of the Creative Circle South Africa, produced in partnership with Kagiso Media. I'm Liana Liebenberg, creative partner at Design Bridge & Partners, and I'll be the guest host for this episode. Today, we're going to dive deep into design in South Africa. We'll be talking about the state of the industry, what's new and what's trending, and taking a look back at the Loeries design category a little bit. With me today, I have two other guests, Vumile Mavumengwana, design specialist and creative director from VM Design. Hey,
Hi there, guys. Hello.
And Wade Moonsamy, co-founder and creative director from Backroads. Hey, Wade.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having us.
Cool, guys. So let's get started. I'm going to start today with probably the most non-controversial question, just to warm us up a little bit. The jury chair at the Loeries for the design category this year, in a particularly fantastic Scottish accent, said, "Fuck the ad agencies," and suggested it was time to stop them eating designers' lunch. Does she have a point? What do you guys think? Booms?
Yeah, this question is interesting. I think there's some validity in it. And I think we need to do better as designers, design agencies and studios. We need to represent ourselves better because we do great work and work that defines the category and work that elevates it, So I think when design agencies don't enter work, what's left to be judged, It's work that the advertising agencies have entered. I think our downfall is design agencies that don't enter as much. And our work often goes unseen, which is the problem. Yeah, I wouldn't say F them, but I think they're doing a better job than we are. So I think we need to up our game in this front.
Totally. It's like, I think design has always been, especially in, we're talking Loeries specifically, it's always been the kind of stepsister of advertising in general. I think Loeries has typically been an advertising focused show. And obviously, we do have a platform with the Loeries to showcase, the best of design in South Africa. And I think we need to Vum's point, kind of put our hand up and shout for our spot. But it's challenging, It's a challenging one. I think being the smaller kind of sister, it's like we want our design to shine and sort of exist outside of just advertising contexts, which I think as design, that's what it is. It's way more long lasting in many instances, I mean, Liana, you'll know, like being part of these sort of big groups, the ad agencies generally take the lead on awards, and design does become second fiddle in some ways.
Don't you guys also feel like it's a bigger challenge for design shops to enter into awards? Because I often find, as you said, Wade, working at a bigger group, that it's easier because there are the budgets, you have the opportunity, you have the resource to put together the entries. Because I do think that, and I agree with you both, that we have fantastic design in this country. And we who are kind of ensconced in this world know this. But I ask the question, why are people not entering more into these spaces? I don't know if any of you have a point of view on that.
Yeah, I do. It's a tricky one, but Backroads is a small design agency. We're a 6-man team in a week, specialized on identity design specifically. And there's a huge deal that goes into entering awards. Obviously, the cost of entry, but there's also case studies and case study videos. It's a very time-consuming and expensive exercise in many instances. And being a small shop as well, it's like you're really competing against big groups that have infinite awards budget. Whereas I think in some instances, being a small independent studio, there are challenges in taking those risks. It's quite an expensive risk, and you hope it pays off, obviously. But ultimately, it's about throwing your hat in the ring and kind of putting your voice out there, and hopefully it resonates in many ways. It doesn't always, we always say, we love the Loeries, we hate it when we lose. It's not possible to do it every year. Some of you guys will know as well, like a lot of design agencies don't enter every year because the projects are longer, or it falls out in and out of that sort of time threshold. So again, you pick your battles, and sometimes there's years with lots of work to be judged, and sometimes not so much. But it is definitely a challenge to answer your question around being able to show up every year and participate.
Yeah, I think you're right, Wade. I think design as an industry, I don't know if we have a culture of entering awards, I think by default, advertising agencies have been doing it for longer, and it's become part of the DNA and part of the game. It's like we have to perform and participate in winning awards. But I don't know, for some reason in the design space, I don't know if we prioritize them or take them seriously. I mean, if we did, then we would see a flood of entries coming through. So I don't know, what do you think, Liana? Is there some truth in that, like that we don't have a culture of entering awards as design specialists?
I think you're right. I think by nature, design is a more kind of solitary pursuit. It doesn't run in such big teams. We're not a industry where, like Wade was saying, a project runs really quickly. So the criteria around entering is sometimes tricky for design agencies to follow through on. But I do agree with what you're saying, is that if we want to promote design on this continent, in the world, if we want people to take it seriously, and I'm not saying that people don't, but, if we want to build the story and the narrative around design, I do think it's worth putting it into these shows more often and prioritizing it, because it is, certainly in Africa and the Middle East, the most direct way you can get your work in front of your peers is to put it into one of these award spaces. Well, that's my opinion on it, at least. But I think that there's also a lot of great work happening in our industry, regardless of a couple of very real constraints that I think everybody is feeling. So we all know that budgets are tight, not just in-house, but also with our clients. I'm sure you have also flagged 120 questions around the power of Gen AI and how we are, as design, going to implement this into our day-to-day work. And design has always been a discipline built on craft, right? It's strategic thinking and craft coming together to make something that resonates with whoever you're talking about. So do you guys feel, or should I rather say, how do you guys think we should make sure, beyond this question around awards, that the value of design and the craft that we put in doesn't get pushed aside by things like budgets and Gen AI? Vums, how do you feel about this?
I think we have to always put creativity at the heart of solving the business problems that we face with our clients and in partnering our clients. There will always be developments in tech and digital sort of tools, but I think nothing trumps creativity. So I think you can get around the constraints of budgets if you are thinking creatively, being resourceful, and finding ways that can break through and stand out and connect to the audiences that we're trying to reach. So I would say we have to focus on creativity and insightful ideas that resonate. I hate using the word so much, but we have to find ideas that will connect and touch the people that we are trying to reach. So I would say creativity is the answer, beyond the tech developments in AI and otherwise.
You say an interesting thing. You say the tools that we use to, I suppose, deliver against these creative ideas. Do you think that AI can become part of the toolbox for a designer?
100%. I think it's already pushing us in that direction, and I think we can't ignore it, and we have to embrace it and to amplify the creativity that we are working within and putting forward.
I think it's an aid, it's like one of those tools. It's one of the ways we can make our craft better. In certain instances, I find integrating it across, a number of our workflows, whether it is like email related or meeting related, or in some of those like soft design requirements, those things don't necessarily affect the craft or outcome from a design point of view, but they can enhance our process to allow us to focus more on the craft kind of components. I think, in brand design specifically, as we're, creating these and building these brand worlds for clients, it's definitely one of those amazing tools where you can kind of shortcut your design time, especially image libraries. I think it's a great, and let me say not image libraries, but image styling and art direction and making brand imagery feel a lot more distinct. There's a lot of ways that we've been using that already, like building it into style guides and building prompts for clients to use to, again, create that sort of visual language that we try to create. So, but I think it's going to keep evolving. We're at a very early stage of Gen AI at the moment. I think the ways that companies like Adobe are introducing it in our software is making it increasingly easier to be more creative. So I think it's overall a plus, but I think there will always be a need for craft and design craft and really a human approach to design that will never go away. I think that the kinds of work we do for the kinds of clients, and obviously that depends, but I think across all levels, small clients, medium clients, big clients, culture clients, corporate clients, I think there are ways that AI has been helpful already and will continue to be. So I'm excited.
I agree that using Gen AI frees up people to think more, right? I'm pretty sure if you ask most designers that the universal enemy that they face is time, right? Because there's always more to craft and more to think about and more to work on. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Wade, on what you think innovation and design looks like these days and where we think it's going in the future.
It's an interesting one. And the word innovation specifically in design is obviously, speaking about Loeries, speaking about where things are going. I think it's one of those pillars that, your work is really judged on in a number of design instances, especially in the Loeries where it's sort of the highest ranking kind of point. It's a bit of a contentious one for me. I would say personally, I think innovation in design is a different thing, right? People often think that means tech and, have we incorporated a level of interesting tech or innovative tech in the way we create brand? I think design goes through waves of, we're going to make, generative logos. And then that was an innovation. And then we're going to, build these tools that allow us to engage with clients more. And you got different, those kinds of innovations. But I find when we speak about innovation, the thing I want to see is like interesting and new expressions of things. I think more about like out of category and are you creating work that really resonates outside of what the convention or what people are used to seeing in design. So if you're doing a banking project or a design project in banking, yes, there can be tech innovations that enable that to be good. But I think the way we make the work interesting and resonant and break out of that category is what's more important than innovation for the sake of innovation. I find in some instances, the innovation part can be a gimmick, that is like not really a real innovation, but something packaged as innovative thinking. But I think you really want, or what I think about is making interesting decisions and really pushing the boundaries of what your categories are and what your clients' categories are.
Any thoughts, Wooms?
Definitely. I think innovation in design is breaking the mold, breaking the convention within that category. I think I'm also, when I judge, I just look for that. What is this piece doing differently, Because I think we do fall in the trap of following the trends of what's popping, what's the new thing, and making that the hero, So I think in design, we have to strip bells and whistles, I guess. It's like things that distract. So it's not the core of it. So what makes this piece stand out and break the category? That would be innovation for me.
Yeah.
Break the category.
I think it takes time and experience to be able to see through the bells and whistles, as you call them, right? I think a lot of the times people do work, and I'm sure we've all seen it, where the tool is so interesting and exciting, the medium is so interesting and exciting that people think that that is the idea that you're putting forward into the world. And they forget, I think they realize at the moment that where you ask them, okay, but what is it saying? Or who are you talking to? Or what are you trying to address? Or what is the enemy in this case? At that point, people realize, oh, wait, no, it's just a tool. It isn't actually the content or the context of the project. So I'm in complete agreement with you guys. I also think that innovation in the future in our world will, I suspect, lean even more into this reinvention of what is expected, and maybe a return a bit to that almost artisanal craft, because as we've said earlier on, this idea of AI is flattening out the playing field in so many ways, and freeing people up to be able to invest in those things again. It's quite exciting, I think, that we could go to a place where this almost deep-seated human truth and level of craft really gets amplified in the work that people put forward. Wade, you said in the beginning that you think that there's a misunderstanding between what innovation looks like in design versus in any of the other communication specialities. And I think that it's an interesting point you make, because we often have to explain that also to people, like what design innovation looks like, as opposed to storytelling in a traditional advertising context, for instance. It's not a lack of storytelling, and it's also not a lack of originality or creativity and a purely kind of visual exploit. It's just a wholly different approach to conceptualizing, I think, right, at the end of the day. But I digress.
No, absolutely. I think it's an interesting one because the lifespan of design is different, whereas in advertising or in, I guess, some of those other communication categories, you're able to move quite quickly on what the innovation intent or in media is, whereas like, okay, we're going to use AI to make a song, or we're going to use this very clever, whatever, API integration to help a B2B company accelerate their marketing. Or social media, I think, was the big one before that. It was like very clear that that's where we're going to be pushing the boundaries of kind of innovation. I think in brand, where the lifespan is not 1 week, 1 month, or 1 year, it's like really it has to outlive a lot of what is currently contemporary, right? Big companies don't rebrand every 6 months in the ways that you do a marketing campaign every 6 months. So I think that there's a timelessness that goes into design, and we have to think very far into the future for something to be living in that way. All the fads that exist currently may not exist a year from now, 2 years from now, but we hope those businesses still there and those businesses are able to live through them. So yeah, I think I always take innovation with a pinch of salt, especially in the way it's conventionally thought about. But I think we want to create ideas that are timeless and long-lasting and simple, Do people understand it? Do people get it? Do people want to wear it? Do people like it? Do we build brands, right? And the fact that a lot of people these days really have an opinion on the ways brand exists and all of that, it's, I think, important to try and speak clearly and honestly, as opposed to chucking in tech and innovation on ideas that water it or seemingly water it down. I think to your point, sometimes you see past that quite easily,
Yes. Speaking of time, as we're recording this today, it's quite a few weeks after the Loeries has happened. And Vumile, I know from experience that you were also judging this year, and we were sitting next to each other for very long hours. I'd like to get your thoughts on this year's awards judging, specifically how the South African work stands up against the regional work, and then just from your experience, how the work stands up against the world, right? Where are we lying at the moment, and what were we looking for in this jury panel in terms of what we ended up awarding at the end of the day?
That's a long question.
Sorry.
I will try and frame it how I see. So I think our work in the region is very good. I think I wish that more work was entered. That's my gripe. Like I see a lot of work around me, but when we in the judging stage or room, the work is not there. I do feel like our work in SA is quite elevated in the region. But I think what trumps our work versus, I guess the Middle East, maybe it's scale in some respect. I think their craft is also sleeker in some instances. And I think there's also more integration with digital integration, it's almost like breaking the traditional ways that we approach design, I don't know if I'm making sense.
And I can maybe build on your sentiment there, Booms. I think, the work coming out of the Middle East, not just in design, but across the full Loeries category spectrum, I think it's incredible, right? It's really purpose-led. It's really intentional and big. Booms, he said, like the scale of it, it's really big work. It's really big ideas. And I didn't judge this year, but what I found, and you guys will know better, and was that I think the South African design work still really stands out. And obviously design is a big category where there's out of home and motion and all those things. But I think work from the African region does kind of stand out. It's like, it's really in those sort of integrated big categories that I think the Middle East work is absolutely cleaning up, and rightly so. I think it's exceptional, well thought out, well crafted, well presented work. But I think to your point, there's so much great work in South Africa. In some ways you want to see more of it, right? But I guess that's the challenge, right? It's like wanting or fighting against wanting to, or trying to enter every year versus trying to kind of bank your entries and enter at once when you can. Yeah.
Mm.
And I think it's also how our work is packaged, when we do enter. So I think that also plays a big role. I think we need to also spend some time in how we tell the story and unpack the idea and why it's potent for that audience, or why that idea and why that execution. I think we need to tell the story and unpack the process, because that elevates it. And I think also one thing to mention, and maybe I might be jumping ahead, is customizing the entry to that category, so not entering the same case study everywhere and hoping that the judges will pick up on the relevance and why it's been entered in that category, So I think it is really making it easier and distilling the power of the entry for that category. Yeah. That's where we are lacking versus the other work in the region, especially the Middle East. They do a better job in packaging their projects and telling the story and making it memorable. Yeah.
I think there's also something to be said for making sure you have a very clear understanding of each one of the design categories that you are intending to put your work into. There's some language overlap, but meaning difference between design as a category and the other categories you see at award shows. If we say mixed media, people don't often understand that we don't mean in the art sense, we mean in the channel sense, for instance. And I'm sure both of you have also come across this, that there's work that has great potential, but is in the wrong place. And it's very difficult for a panel of judges to judge something based on its validity in the category that it's placed in against the quality of the idea if it just doesn't work. You can't be putting a piece of digital design work in a static category, for instance, if you want us to judge the motion. And I think that those things do creep in, and people question why their work doesn't convert. But more often than not, I think it's making 100% sure that, as you're saying, Booms, you're telling the right story in the right place to the audience, because the audience for an awards case study is the judging panel at the end of the day, right? So you do have to explain it in a succinct, clear, single-minded way. And the Middle East does that very good. They're very good at unpacking those things and highlighting the design in the entries, as opposed to putting in universal case form that can go into other places as well. Okay, so I also wanted to talk to you guys about African design specifically. You mentioned, Vums, that South African work stands up not only to the Africa Middle East audiences, but to the rest of the world. What do you believe makes the African design so distinctly different from other work in the world?
I think our visual narrative hasn't been exploited enough, and I think naturally over the years, we've been looking at aesthetic that's been around for years in the design space, the traditional graphic design. So I think our work is starting to bubble and go out into the world. I think there's a lot of richness in the stories that we tell through the design, and also the source where it comes from. I think because there's so many cultures and nuances in our society, it feels fresh, and there's so much potential in growing the visual language in the African context. And I think it's still in evolution. It's in the process of coming to life. And we are in it. And I think it's changing every year, just like other disciplines like music. You can see how the transition of the genres are sort of evolving, but inspired by the previous. I mean, we have some standard cues that always dial Africa, but I think we have to keep building on them to make it fresh and relevant for future-proofing our brands and our art, I think one thing that doesn't bug me, but I think it's sort of like first base for design, where we always go to patterning, and almost like killing the integrity of where it comes from. It's like step and repeat everything, and then it's African, I think we need to find a way to make it authentic and meaningful, not just always step and repeat pattern is African, That doesn't qualify. I think we need to build on that. I don't know what the answer is, but I think we need to build more of the African visual language beyond just, we're a very colorful nation, and I think we can't divorce ourselves from that, but it's just how we bring our Africanness in the design language. And I think that's like an evolving process that we are in. There's so much potential. I'll come back to the cultures, because there's so many cultures in Africa, and the Middle East, and there's so much to draw from. There's so many, building blocks that can inform our design, that can even be the new player in the global stage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wade, do you feel there's an appetite with our audiences for work that feels even more distinctly African?
Absolutely. It's honestly what we get briefed on a lot, I think a lot of agencies really wanting to capture fresh African spirit in our work, films. I think there's been, to your point, there's very first base references for that, when wanting to sort of create what feels African. But I think, it's our job and it's, as designers, as leaders in the States, it's representing African culture in fresh ways, in all our regions. There's so much energy to capture, and it's less about those conventional design tropes. But I think it's really about capturing an energy and the feeling of what it's like to be African. Obviously, we're going through, an African zeitgeist at the moment where people from all around the world are looking to Africa for our culture, for our music, for our food, for our taste. And I think that's exciting, that we're at a point where Africa is very much in conversation, but I think more importantly, kind of shaping or redefining how the West, for example, what you're saying, kind of reshaping the reference of what design is globally, not just African design. It's I think we must elevate them. I think we really want to start to influence the global design narrative through African design, which is what's exciting and what we're always kind of looking to do.
This idea that the rest of the world is hungry to see what we are doing in Africa, I feel is the most exciting place for us to be. And I completely believe that there's so much more depth and richness, not just in the individual cultures in Africa, but we have an entire playground of cultures and ways in which those cultures are starting to interact with each other, and ways that we can express that in our contemporary kind of African design languages, right? How do you represent a country or a continent with so much diversity on it? And how do you start talking to the broader audiences without making anyone feel excluded? I think that's where the joy lies for me, is finding those commonalities, finding those cultural references that ultimately, I think through the design that we do, can show people how much we are the same as much as we are individuals, and how much we can take that thought and take that kind of collective energy and excitement that comes from this continent and put it out into the broader world. I feel that there's so much space for people not just to see how we visually express ourselves, but learn from the way that we interact and the way that we talk and the way that we communicate across age, across culture, across time, really, in this country that we live in. And that becomes a really powerful place for us to play and a fantastic thing for us to try and drive, as a legacy for design in this country, really.
Love that.
Not sure where that came from, but there it is.
Maybe add another point. I think I do miss that publication that we once had in the design space, EJUSI, how
yes.
and curated the homegrown, design language, we need to bring something back like that, where we, curate our style, and the evolution of it on the street, in branding, in culture, in societies, different places where design lives, and it lives in so many places. I mean, even on packaging over the years, I wish, maybe this could be a steer towards that direction. How can we curate and bank the evolution of our design and defining it, into the future? We need something like that back again.
I think that is a fantastic point for us to stop today. And a really provocative question to leave our audience with is, how do we bank this? How do we share this kind of collective design language going into the future? So we're going to end here today. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me. Thank you to everyone that's listening. I would really like to thank both Vumile and Wade for spending some time with me today, and for everybody for listening. Please do follow and subscribe to the Talking in Creative Circles podcast and get future episodes. See you guys soon.
Cheers. Thank you.
Talking in Creative Circles is available wherever you get your podcasts.